welcome back to Mindful Notions, where we help young professionals do more with less. This is episode 2 of our latest series, Accessible Intelligence. I'm here as your host, Sam Lee, also with my co-host now, Austin, Hillary, and Megan. And today we're going to be talking about a recent MIT study that had a pretty shocking statistic. It said that 95% of organizations are currently getting zero return on their AI investment. And that was reported by Axios on August 21st. The report and the article talked about how these organizations are getting, again, zero return despite enterprise investment of about $30 billion to $40 billion into generative AI. And even firms that are now using AI are not seeing widespread disruption. So Austin, you were the one who wanted to talk about this article and also this topic more broadly of where that falls into the hyper doomerism of AI. So do you want to talk a bit about what you felt about this topic?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest question right now, even if you're in the AI ecosystem or if you're not, is what's going on with AI? Is it overhyped? Is it not overhyped? Is it real? Is everyone just kind of making a big deal about stuff? And then this study came out and I think made broad news, regardless of how much you know about AI. To some, it confirms that it's useless. To others, you know, like Palantir's CEO, they said, oh, we're not using it quite right. But I think what it brings up is this um, you know, interesting gap between this and the investment we're still seeing in AI. So usually when people talk about this topic, I think people really talk about macro lens, want to look at business integration, want to look at how, as this said, is value being generated. Obviously, that's not what we are trying to do. And so I think it'd be really interesting if, we can come at this discussion, really talk about it from our use cases and from how we use it. Because I think one thing that this study shows is that this top-down approach of integration of, CEOs going to these employees and saying, hey, use it. It's apparently great, so use it. Doesn't work. And what people are saying instead is that's going to take integration by, AI native people, which will be our generation, a bit above, a bit below. But we will be the type of people who will be, through integrating AI into our work streams, bringing that value. So that's where I kind of want to get to was, how are we using AI? And in our use cases, are we seeing it be useful? Or are we seeing it not be useful? And, hopefully maybe people learn a little bit also through seeing what we do.
Yeah, one of the notes that we have been discussing is that we believe that AI can't necessarily be top-down implemented. It must be native built. And what we mean by that is as this native generation of people coming into their own as young professionals, which would include people a few years above and below us, how are we experiencing AI? Like, as you mentioned, there is that expectation, I think, for a lot of young professionals to be able to use it, but in very certain ways. And sometimes it's banned in certain cases as well. So that adds a layer. So I think something that we really wanted to get more into this episode in terms of what recent timeline we want to talk about. Last time, we kind of gave a broad overview of the ChatGPT timeline and our personal uses as well. But this time, it's going to be a bit more of how we're using AI in our working or our school capacities. So I actually think it'd be cool to start with a piece that Hillary just put out where she talked about how she's been using, yes, let's all do a little clap for that as well. I want to start there because it's about LSAT and AI, and a lot of young professionals are probably in a similar boat of either thinking about law school or actively applying. So, Hillary, do you want to just kick us off by describing the piece, but also a little bit of how you got to this point of using ChatGPT? Because I think it's safe to say you were not one of the first overzealous early adopters when Model 3 came out in November 22.
Yeah. So I released a piece last week that is actually the first of a two-part series. Essentially what it is, it's documenting one of my first instances of experimentation with AI. And in this particular case, it was using AI within for a very specific learning purpose, which was studying for the LSAT. This first piece focused on using ChatGPT specifically for the purpose of building a schedule, building a study schedule. And what drew me to what led me to this point, as you mentioned, I wasn't necessarily the most enthused about using AI to begin with. I didn't really experiment with AI prior to this. I'd used it a few times just to test it out, to like do some research, basic things. Didn't necessarily have the most positive experience. Wasn't very happy with its work product.
Can you
This
actually say a
time
bit more
around,
about that first? Like, what weren't you happy about?
yeah, I like always go back to this moment when I was trying to brainstorm for my thesis, and I just remember brainstorming with ChatGPT. And it brought me to this topic of transnationalism. And I was like, I'll write about transnationalism. Great. That sounds like exactly what I'm interested in. It's so intersectional. And, like honestly, props to ChatGPT for giving me like a term that really resonated with me. But the more I dove into it, I was like, this term actually is kind of empty. Like, I do not know what is transnational. Like, I actually brought some professors and they were like, like what context are you talking about? Like transnational identities? Like, are you talking about like they brought up like soccer players who are playing like in multiple countries?
Oh
Are you
my
talking
God.
about businesses? Are you talking about networks? I was like, maybe all of the above. So basically, essentially, the reason why it was a somewhat negative experience was because I felt almost like pigeonholed into writing about transnationalism because I was like, well, this was an idea that I co-created with ChatGPT. And I was like, it gave me this great idea. It like seems to resonate. And I think I was inclined to commit to it. But over time I was like, yeah, I need to be able to come up with an idea for my thesis organically because otherwise it, it's gonna seem fluffy. Like I need to understand what I'm writing about before I go into like jumping into these keywords. And I think what ChatGPT is good at is jumping into the keywords. So that was my somewhat negative, like initial experience with ChatGPT, which replicated on a somewhat continued to be the case. But I relied a little bit less on it in future instances. So this time it was guided by desperation in the sense that I did not do as well as I had wanted on my first LSAT, which I took in June. And then actually I was talking with Austin and he was like, why don't you just like use ChatGPT to like help you figure out your schedule. And the reason why we were specifically talking about my schedule because I had a pretty packed schedule at the time where I was just going back and forth between a lot of things. I felt very overwhelmed, trying to balance studying on top of everything else. I was like, whatever, I'll try. I need to get this point. So I turned to ChatGPT and essentially through what I document in the piece I released last week was I was very pleasantly surprised by the output. And I have continued to use ChatGPT for this purpose of scheduling. And especially now, I'm using it specifically for beginnings of my law school application process. The reason why I think it's so good and why I think it taps into what ChatGPT is really good at is that it's objective in some weird way, right? I'm telling you, here is my availability. Here are my constraints for the day, for the week, whatever. Here are my objectives. Help me spread out these objectives over the week, given the openings and given the openings in my schedule. Effectively, it's like that, right? And theoretically, all of us should be able to just like do that, I guess, right? It's literally just identifying gaps. But I think when it comes to this task of scheduling in particular, there's a lot of sort of emotions involved in some way or another, especially when you're doing work that you're passionate about or very strongly interested in. For me, it's like, I feel like it can never stop. Like it was this issue of sustainability. So working with ChatGPT really helped me be sustainable in my studying, but also set reasonable objectives in my day to day. And that was a use case that really resonated with me, which is just helping me organize, like leaning into what I think ChatGPT does best, which is organizing and making that less emotionally tumultuous for me. So
Megan, Megan, I want to bring you in here. You have been doing some work with OpenAI this year, promoting its new features and releases on your platforms. You go by Gen Z Bestie. And one of the more recent releases has been Study Mode. This was released by
Mhm.
OpenAI on July 29th, 2025. And in that release, OpenAI talks about how we've built Study Mode in ChatGPT to help answer the question of ensuring that ChatGPT is used to support real learning and it's not just offering solutions without helping students make sense of them. I'm curious, based on your interactions with the team, and I know you attended a launch event in the UK when study mode came out, how much of what Hillary just described of using ChatGPT in a productive and learning sense is resonating with what you've heard from the teams at OpenAI? Is that also how they're thinking about it, or are they thinking about it in a pretty different way based on what you're understanding?
Yeah, I think what Hillary mentioned very much resonated, what it seems like the goal from the OpenAI education was. I think like how they see ChatGPT being a really great study tool is be a jumping off point for you in your learning process. So I think, and I'm also curious to go back to Hillary on this, whether you felt like having ChatGPT give you this term transnationalism, whether it was like that, like a good starting point to go off from that maybe led you to explore different topics or to dive deeper to relevant areas, or whether that kind of gave you a bias for something that maybe wasn't great to start off from. Um, that was the question that came up to me when Harry was talking about her students. But I guess from what I heard from the OpenAI, the goal with this tool was really just to take feedback from students who said that, they rely on the tool quite a lot and take a lot of output that it gives them at face value, to kind of provide some sort of framework to help students be like, okay, here and out, but how can we continue to challenge the outputs that we're given? Um, and I guess that was their goal with the fact that this feature now only produces more questions, or only help you try to kind of break down topics into more like digestible pieces. Um, and I think that was definitely like a step in the right direction. I've tried it. I think it works kind of well. I think where it doesn't work super well is sometimes it thinks you need more background on the topic than you actually do. I think it's not great at kind of like meeting user where they're at in terms of like what they already know, what background they might already have, because obviously it kind of treats every question the same. So let's say I already know like a little bit about like mitosis. It'll like break it down for me in like steps that are kind of just not what are helpful. So I found it to be an interesting kind of like, I guess, initiative on their part. I think it's still like definitely needs to be still in progress, but was interesting to try. But yeah, I'm curious to go back to Hillary on what her thoughts were on using ChatGPT as kind of like jumping on point, or whether that helps or more detrimental in your experience.
Yeah, I could jump in here. I think kind of the context is that, and actually both instances, like both that time when I was using it to come up with transnationalism, the second time when I was using ChatGPT to study for the LSAT, both those situations were really motivated by a lot of anxiety, a lot of
Mm.
stress, and I was reaching that point like because I felt very desperate. It was not like my first choice in terms of an outlet, and the reason why I wanted to bring that context in is, um, I did feel it didn't. I did feel in many ways glued to the idea of transnationalism, and I think it was related to that emotional aspect as well, in the sense that I was nervous. I was like, I do not have a thesis topic. Like, how do I move forward with this? Like, how do I choose a topic that I feel like resonates with me? And I'm going to spend a whole year like writing this huge paper on, right? Like, how do I choose this? And it was just easy to see ChatGPT as the source of authority, especially because I had been working with it, right? I was telling it, like, here are my interests. And, like, broadly speaking, and incorporated it, right? It gave me this concept that was very interdisciplinary, drew upon, business and global affairs, broadly speaking, right? But so I guess in that way, I didn't feel like it was a very productive jumping off point for me personally, because it felt to me like I had, and maybe it was an expectation thing where I was going into it expecting it would reveal greater insight, But what it really did was it just bridged together the surface level thoughts I had at the time. And for me, that didn't significantly advance my thinking at the time.
And I think just to talk about that a little bit more. Sorry, I was out of frame. To talk about that a little bit more, I don't think people really realize how much that experience affected her. Because, if you don't know her, it is crazy that she's using ChatGPT now. She was the most, despite what she's working on and doing very great and, tackling the question and very intellectually, has not been the most active in using AI products. So,
Yeah.
first of all, applaud to her for starting to use that. But I think what it really goes to show is how AI is being used. And it kind of goes back to, again, this idea of the promise of AI. And it really is this thing that I think is tempting to use to kind of give you everything. And I think at the beginning stages that there's good reason why people saw it like that because, it just got released. Most people didn't really know about what it does. It just seems like this chatbot that you interact with and it will give you stuff. And, I think if we look back at it from a perspective now, I think it's pretty easy to kind of come to the conclusion that that isn't AI's, or at least ChatGPT's skill. What she's using it now is very much so up its skill alley. And I think that really takes it back to looking at it in terms of this idea of a tool and thinking back in terms of, is it revolutionary? Like, how are we framing this argument about revolutionary? Because, if it's something that we're expecting to just give it knowledge and it give us exactly what we want, I don't know if that's something that will ever happen, right? But if it's something where, you should see her prompts for creating these schedules. It is paragraphs. It's not like she's just giving it, one or two words. She's giving it every single thing it might imaginably need. And then it works perfectly. There's a little hiccups, but it works perfectly, gives her exactly the type of scheduling she wants. So I think it's really looking at like different types of use cases and we're really narrowing down to how it works and what it works best at.
Let's switch out of ChatGPT for now to talk about a different AI software. I want to turn to Perplexity. This is an AI software that was founded in 2022. And as of July 2025, the company is valued at $18 billion. It's backed by figures like Jeff Bezos. Austin, I think you were the one that incorporated Perplexity first. So do you want to kick us off here as well?
Yeah, this was the way I got introduced into AI. I think I talked about a little bit on the last episode about my boss kind of pushing me to use this for a lot of different assignments. I think I think it ties very similar to Hillary's experience where I first used ChatGPT, thought it was interesting, didn't really think it was that useful because, I think I was similarly trying to use it in terms of a brainstorming, writing type of experience where I think at the time and maybe still now, like it's a type of activity that humans are just good at and AI is still working on. Um, and, it wasn't that good at a bunch of stuff. It was limited by, a certain time of, I think, 2022 of the internet. So Perplexity came out, offered this whole ability to search using it. And it seems to me like revolutionary. And I think it's similar to Hillary's experience because I think how you use it and what you expect from it matters a lot in terms of how you see it. And so yeah, this became, I still use it every day, but an amazing tool. And one of the first AI wraps, which is, not an LLM itself, but uses an LLM to kind of market itself.
Could you give a bit of context about like, what you use Perplexity for and like what a wrap is?
Yeah. So I used to start with the wrap. As you know, majority of these companies are trying to create AI models, LLMs, large language models. And those are kind of the meat of everything. It's creating this consciousness, this intelligence through these neural networks. That is what, Google, OpenAI, Meta, in different forms are trying to do. There's other companies that are called wraps that are not trying to create those models specifically, but trying to use it to create products. And the way I think of it is similar, I think, to a phone and apps. There's a certain amount of companies that are trying to create phones, but not a lot because it's something very difficult, very capital intensive, hard to do. But once you have a phone, anyone can make an app. And it's this thing of you're trying to go for what do people actually want to use that product for, and that's how apps are created. That's also how I think apps are created. So Perplexity was someone looking at these models at first and saying, okay, it's useful, but it doesn't really give you, it doesn't search. It only is a store of knowledge. And so what someone did is tagged, I think, any AI model you can use in Perplexity, but tags that to the internet. So you search, it's very good at giving you facts, giving you data. So at first, it was the only thing that gave you links. Slowly, this has been integrated into other LLMs, but still, I think it holds this top tier in terms of search. Really, if you're looking for facts.
One thing that Perplexity and other AI softwares has attracted is increasing legal scrutiny. For Perplexity, that includes allegations of copyright infringement, unauthorized content use, trademark issues. OpenAI is currently in an active lawsuit against the New York Times, alleging copyright infringement for using New York Times articles to train AI models like ChatGPT. Anthropic is recently settled for $1.5 billion that is now once again being appealed to book publishers for allegedly using their materials. So as someone who uses Perplexity, I know the Perplexity leaders have spoken about their feelings on this. Like, what's your take on that, Austin, of where the potential legal battles could be? Because I think, yeah, all of these AI softwares are in the midst of it, but it seems like Perplexity has at least the most exposure right now because of the inherent nature of being a search engine that's beating out traditional search engines.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to replace the lawyer of our group, the legal representation. And I can't really speak to the actual arguments or cases. I think where I'm saying is this is maybe the one place where it does feel revolutionary, AI, is it just feels like a battle between traditional versus new organizations. Perplexity, I think you rightly said, it seems to be on this front edge of these lawsuits because it's the one that's most obviously interacting with the internet and other content on it. ChatGPT, all these, I think almost 100% they use all this data when creating it. But Perplexity is the one that you can actually click the link and you see, oh, wow, it takes you straight to this website. And obviously that whole business repercussions. I think what's interesting to me is from what I've read, it seems like the analysis and the plan going forward for all these AI companies is just to not care. Like they think it's more worthwhile to get that market share, to put that product out there, train that model, and then you'll pay someone down the line in terms of all this infringement. Which, yeah, interesting way to think about. I think it seems like the internet is just being totally shaken up by it.
I don't know.
Oh, go ahead.
I would also, I think that's a good analysis in terms of thinking about the business, like the corporate aspect, the corporate and legal, right? But I do also want to bring in a bit of our personal perspectives, right? Especially as students, as young professionals, as young people who are still figuring out how to navigate the world. And I think, this is a bit of a generalization, but I think information should be accessible, right? And I think what we're seeing now with a lot of these copyright cases is this question, and I'm simplifying it a little bit, but how can big companies gatekeep information, right? And some ChatGPT, other AI models, not saying they're the best guys, right? But I'm saying they're the ones who are using this information, right? Making it accessible to us as users, right? But what they're going up against are textbook publishers, for example, right? Who are no, we have copyright. This is protected. And, I'm not trying to challenge the legal merits of that, right? But I'm thinking from purely a user and student perspective, right? Textbooks are expensive. When we were in school, our textbooks were very expensive.
Yeah.
And should that information just be available to us, right? Like that's a somewhat like philosophical question and like has a variety of implications for capitalism. But I did also want to bring in that user and like specifically like student broadly defined angle to what you just said.
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly say this is something we've both thought a lot about because one of the things I use Perplexity and another platform, Google AI Studio, for is to synthesize articles online into kind of one analysis. And we've had a lot of discussions about like, where is the legality with this in terms of, you're using other people's content, but at the same time, it doesn't feel too much different than if someone just read all of the content and then wrote something. All the difference is instead of a person, you're using artificial intelligence to read, digest all the content and write something. And, it's not, there's no there's nothing wrong legality wise with a person doing it. But it is that thing, I think, especially when people start and, if you're trying to start implementing AI, it seems like almost like a scary middle ground of, I'm not sure at least where the legality is, if someone will eventually come back in and say something.
Let's move on to what I'm sure will be one of the most searched for or used terms by the end of 2025. But vibe coding has quickly entered our lexicon. And specifically, there are essentially now AI software or AI apps that allegedly can just help you code. And one of the most prominent products is Lovable. It dubs itself the world's first AI full stack engineer. And Megan is the most startup-y out of the four of us right now and probably has the most experience with vibe coding. So from the insider perspective, Megan, can you please explain your experience learning about what vibe coding was, what it actually does, what are any myths that need to be busted? But yes, please enlighten us on your personal journey so far with vibe coding.
Yeah, totally. I think my first intro to vibe coding was using this platform called Cursor, which is like AI agent code assistant. And it's not full stack the way that Lovable or 44 is. They're all similar, like one one swamped to full stack platforms. Um, but it was amazing. As someone who kind of studied computational neuroscience, which sounds very technical, but in reality, it was not very practical when it comes to actually applying like coding skills, building full sites, for example. So these platforms literally let you type in natural language. Um, Anything that you want to build, and then based on it's a models have been trained on different code bases and things that allow it to like really understand context and bridge context from natural language code, actually like create full stack applications. And I guess I've experimented a bit with it and posted it on my platforms about me like just like playing around creating different projects, and they work really really well. I think uh, maybe a misconception though about these vibe coding platforms is there's actually a fun article that came out recently about this, but um, this app called T something. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but it was released in the App Store. It was web coded, and I think it was maybe like a matchmaking platform. Um, but because it was vibe coded, there were a lot of like security gaps in like the code base, and someone was able to like reverse engineer it and basically like release personal information online. So I think something that's really interesting about vibe coding is it like makes the initial like creation of products with code quite easy. It does not take away the importance of like installing like security measures within platforms. I think it's a great jumping off point for people who are not technical to get into building technical projects and launch things that they wouldn't have been able to before. But I think um, there's a conception that like if you're not technical, you can kind of like launch anything. But I think there's this extra step of once you have built something with Vibe, find someone who understands like cybersecurity and how to implement like the appropriate cybersecurity features into like a fully full stack platform is also really important. But I am very excited, I think, about all of these new vibe coding platforms because I really do think it democratizes access to building and entrepreneurship for a lot of people that wouldn't have been able to launch ideas and bring them to life before.
Right. Right. And at recent hackathons that you've gone to, are people vibe coding there? Like, has it become a community thing as well? Have you seen that?
Yeah, totally. It's actually funny. If you're not vibe coding most of your hackathon projects, then you're kind of like singing because vibe coding just expedites the speed of producing products. Hackathons, it's really racing against time to build something launchable. So there's all these like creators online that actually talk through how they won like dozens of hackathons with entirely vibe coded projects, which I find so funny. I think it's really cool though that yeah, you can win hackathon being totally not technical because at the end, like hackathons are judged based off of like what you can produce. It's not really like testing like the infrastructure or anything. So if you can create something and it's functional, it looks awesome, then you can win hackathons with vibe code.
Wow, good to know. For anybody out there, you too can vibe code and win a hackathon. Hillary.
I feel like something that I'm thinking about, especially I'm not familiar with the case that you mentioned, Megan, about the security issues with that app. But I do wonder like the extent to which there are confounding factors at play. Again, I don't know this context, right? But um you can build an app, right? But to have a successful application, oftentimes you need infrastructure, right? It's not just a matter of like one person being able to preempt security reasons, but like you need to have the business savvy to be able to do it. You need to like have awareness of like the necessary like cybersecurity regulations. And the I think the bigger picture idea that I'm trying to highlight here is I think I fully agree with you, Megan, that like vibe coding is amazing for like democratizing access to just creating things, right? But I think we have to be careful sometimes when we think about like how how do we create things responsibly, right? Like it makes it more accessible to people, but at the same time, like accessibility without context, without all the necessary support, without the necessary institutions, I think can sometimes be. I mean, in this case with security breaches, like literally dangerous, right? So I guess I'm curious. I would like pose it back onto you, like if you were to sort of interrogate this idea of vibe coding as democratizing force, right? Like it is like I would say a good thing to give people access to to just creating things, right? To entrepreneurship, right? But like I guess going on to the opposite side of things, right? Like what are things that people need to be aware of? How do you go about vibe coding successfully? And if I hope this doesn't make it too complicated, right? But this is like I think an aspect of this is also the environmental aspect, right? Like using AI sustainably and responsibly as well, and not just doing it to create new things, to create new products, right? But to do things that have a sustainable impact on the world.
hmm Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think as an entrepreneur, who definitely didn't feel the most confident in my capabilities, vibe coding was life changing because when you are trying to build a company and pitch a product to venture capitalists and try to raise money, the first thing they're going to ask you for is your MVP. If you don't have MVP, you really don't have a like valid pitch. And the biggest barrier to building that is code. And so what vibe coding platforms allow entrepreneurs to do is build that MVP, which you can then pitch to raise money. And I think it's that gap that vibe code really fills. In addition to the creative aspect of anyone who wants to build a game to, I don't know, them study or build a game that's personalized to them that they can play with their friends. That's something that Vibe is really useful for. I think it's really important what you said about having to be really conscious about the implications of what we build and be conscious of the consequences of not building a secure, safe platform. I think vibe coding is not like it's not being sold currently, like at its current state, to be like to go from 0 to a launch kind of product, I don't think Lovable is selling the product. You can build something that requires a lot of like security considerations and then launch it to the world. I think people have done that, which is where the consequences do happen. I think like what you're building for is, hey, you don't need to know how to build like these creative projects or build these MVPs that you might need to make your dreams a reality. Um, so yeah, I think like that point is really important. And on the like the water and environmental impact, the water usage that AI takes up, I think that's also a really important consideration. Um, and like something I've been thinking about quite a lot as someone who's building in like the AI space. I think that there's a lot of ways you can use AI more consciously, and I was like here to hear about how you guys approach doing that. Um, but I'm someone who very much believes that there are a lot of companies that are working on like the climate impact of AI and building infrastructure to make AI usage a lot more sustainable. I do feel like as R&D develops, we'll be able to use AI and be users of AI in a more responsible and environmentally friendly way. But I think it's kind of like that comes as the technology and research develops. But yeah, how do you guys go about being AI consumers using AI, but also being conscious about, I guess, the environmental impact?
I just wanted to jump in real quick to say it seems like there's this tension constantly in across all the AI tools in terms of democratizing access and institutional protections. Like there's a reason, I guess, that things are institutionalized because it standardizes, it has regulations in a way. And I say that because it seems like this case of like vibe coding having amazing potential, as you said, anyone can realize their dreams, even if you have limited technological knowledge. But there are reasons why companies exist, why, why you need a full roster. There's all these people say that, with AI, you don't need a marketing person. You don't need, a CMO or whatever. There's a reason why those positions exist. I wonder why, I wanted to connect this to what we were talking about earlier with what you said specifically, Hilary, about AI democratizing access to knowledge and tying it to textbooks. And in that context, I think it's very easy to play normative cards in terms of like, you know, you're democratizing access to knowledge, which is a great thing. But then you're also in a way ignoring the institution of, not that you ignored it, but these textbooks, how it is for creating knowledge for authors. I just find it interesting because on that side, I think most people would come from the perspective of normatively favoring AI and democratizing knowledge. Let me take this other case, which is, security and vibe coding. I think also some people would say, oh, well, security is actually very important. And that dissonance between, I think it's the exact same balance or exact same, tension, but appears in different ways and gets taken at different angles, despite kind of being the same tension of how much do we want people to be able to disrupt versus how much do we want, or are we afraid of the risks of disruption?
I want to move on to the last part of the conversation that I think will touch on a lot of those points, which is, I think, for as AI friendly the four of us are to varying degrees, something that I've been thinking about this past week is that there is this group of people who are also in our age range that are probably using AI 10 times more than us because they're also probably working a lot more than us. And it stems from this Wall Street Journal article that Austin put in our group chat titled AI Startup Founders Tout a Winning Formula, No Booze, No Sleep, No Fun. It was released this past week. And a quote from one of the founders was, she had quit her junior year at Stanford University. And she said, I've learned a lot more from building companies instead of going to classes, she said, echoing others. Startups require little more than an idea and a laptop dangling the prospect that founders can single-handedly run billion-dollar enterprises. And that gets into the work culture that they go into, like the 996. They're using AI a lot, which of course has environmental implications, responsibility implications. So based on this article, and I think what it's talking about just verbalizes a lot of what we already know among our generation. Where do we think that's heading? Like, what are the implications of this group of people, like, yes, in Silicon Valley, but others that are trying to use AI to, like, I think inherently do a good thing, which is change the world or like try to make as big of an impact as possible. But as young professionals, like probably messing up at certain points, which of course has again like environmental, institutional impacts. Like, what are the implications that come to mind for you guys when we think about this group?
I mean, just I can go first, but for me, it seems miraculous, almost like I think one other sentence that stood out to me from that article was once in a lifetime opportunity. How many people see this as the way to kind of get out of what seems like the only path or what seems like a corporate loop or, you know, what some might call a boring life. And we were discussing this in the group chat, and I don't think it seems honestly like a rough life. I'm sure you enjoy the grind, but also it's very demanding. I don't think a lot of people would want to do that, but I think it is miraculous that there is almost this idea of like a gold rush moment, a way people can break the loop. And, and I think some definitely focus on impacts and what they're trying to create. But I think from what I've heard and from what I got from the article, a lot of it's just this focus on the opportunity. If you don't seize this moment, it's not that the world's going to be destroyed. It's that you're going to not have the opportunity to climb the social ladder, to, live that founder lifestyle where you travel, make a bunch of money, etc.
I feel like maybe I'm biased because I am one of those people who kind of chose to go like a more conventional route and just pursue building a startup and also on an AI. And I also happen to know some of the people that were featured in that article. And I think part of like the sort of era of opportunity that really resonates with me is that I know people our age who are 20, 21, 22, 23 have raised upwards of millions, hundreds of millions sometimes to build companies. And chance that's given and the responsibility that is invested in people so young is something that is an opportunity that doesn't come around very often. And I think like it happened when .com kind of internet exploded, and then we had Facebook and we had Google. Really old institutional investors allowed young people with creativity and the drive to go and build something amazing that products that we will use and love and utilize daily today. And I think it's kind of like a chance that, yeah, doesn't come around like so often. We hit the inflection point with technology that allows us to just build and create kind of indefinitely. Um, I think something maybe is over dramatized. It's like the lifestyle of a startup founder. I don't think you necessarily have to work like 12 hours a day, 100 plus hours a week to be a successful founder. But I think what that article really demonstrated was like there are a group of honest kids our age that are doing really crazy things with technology and with AI. They're being given all the resources that they need to do it, and they're loving it. I mean, they might not be drinking or something or having I guess the traditional fun, but they're loving their work and kind of like in a community of other people who are kind of like in that same grind. And yeah, honestly, for me, I feel very compelled by just like the opportunities are given to people so young because of AI. That's what's the most exciting part for me.
Yeah.
I think something I would just quickly add is just understanding what that opportunity stands in contrast against. I think a lot of young people don't feel like they have opportunity to really pursue their dreams, their passions when they're post grad. I think that's especially becoming, just speaking for myself, it feels like a problem because I feel like I was empowered to like solve the big questions when I was in school. And then all of a sudden I'm out of school and I feel like I've been reduced to doing less impactful things. And it's actually it's like it feels very visceral, like the sense of just almost being underemployed. Like I don't know if I'm using that word correctly exactly, but like the
Like
sense that
underutilized.
underutilized.
Underemployed's right.
I don't know because it just feels like I have these abilities that I'm just not tapping into. I have to say like I'm an expert in the field I currently work in. Like by no means. There are people who have been there for 30 years have so much more on me. But I also have something else to offer. And I feel like at least in corporate, right? At least in my role. And I feel like this is something that maybe resonates with other people is that um like you just don't feel like you have that opportunity in a conventional path. And I think what's compelling about that startup culture is that you, in many, for me at least, it feels continuous from school. It feels like it gives you
Mm.
the opportunity to keep exploring, to keep thinking critically, to keep seeing the world as something you can change. And I think that's also why there's so many young people doing it because it feels so natural when you go from school being a place that encourages that to like that being your full-time job.
So let's close out with the question that we've been driving towards. Is artificial intelligence overhyped? And instead of just asking that broadly, we're going to do it in rapid fire, broken down into 4 more fun questions than that. So everybody please limit your responses to 1 word to 1 sentence. Looking at you, Hillary, in particular. And we'll do Austin, Megan, Hillary, and then me, since that has been the order. So are you ready? Rapid fire. If you had to put a percentage on it, how overhyped is AI right now on a scale of 0 to 100%? Austin.
Wow, he did not give us this beforehand, by the way. I just rapid fire. I'm gonna say in terms of overhyped, 30%.
Right?
30% overhyped.
Yes.
Mm. Yeah, I was gonna say the same.
Oh, okay. Good. Some agreement. Hillary.
80%.
Ooh, I would say 50. I'm like in the middle between you guys because I can see it both sides. All right. What's one AI tool you've tried that completely has failed to live up to its promises? We've talked a lot about tools that have worked, but what about any AI tools that you personally have not really gone on board with, Austin?
For me, it isn't a tool because for me, I think what it boils down to is every AI has its use case. There's times I've used AI, like ChatGPT, like Google Studio, and it just did not work. I'm like, this is useless. But then, I think it boils more down to like, it's just not good at that function specifically.
Hmm.
But maybe I'll just go with ChatGPT because I think everyone goes to that.
Fair. Megan?
Yeah, mine is use case based also, but they're not very good at taking in a lot of context right now, and I wish they took in more. You probably have to pay for like expensive models to get to do what you want with that, but yeah, mine.
Oh,
I'll just say ChatGPT for writing.
okay. I'm glad nobody said Notion because now we're all using Notion. So that was actually that was a Rorsch test. So I'm glad I know where everyone stands on that. And for me, I'd actually say Perplexity. I'm sorry, Austin, but I like cannot. I get confused every time I use it. But maybe that's for another episode. All right. If you had to choose between losing access to all your AI tools or losing access to your smartphone for a month, what would impact your productivity more? So losing AI tools or your smartphone for a month. Austin.
Well, I think that's an obvious answer because if you take away my smartphone, I'm not going to be on YouTube or Instagram. So my productivity, if that's what we're rating, skyrocket.
Okay.
Now, I still think probably smartphone if it's just talking about use case, because most of smartphone I think is just convenience. Don't want to use your computer, but AI, I don't think I use it the best at all or to its most, but I think there's a lot more I could do with it.
Megan?
Yeah, kind of agree. Right now it'd be smartphone. But I also, in my personal life, have not incorporated all the AI tools I could. And I know there are a lot out there that are great that would probably be helpful. But so far, yeah, smartphone for me.
Ed? Hill?
Also, in this current moment, maybe AI, actually.
She's a hater.
Like, you would rather give up AI than your smartphone.
I think losing AI would impact my productivity more.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you as well. I think at this point, which is the shift. Yeah. And then final question, what's one area where you think AI is actually underhyped and deserves more attention? Austin, when you're ready.
I was going to want to ask about that. She thinks it's 80% overhyped, but she can't give it up. But
she's a contradictory person.
I know. Where it's underhyped. I think where it's underhyped is, I think, just application. I think it's hard to say, but I think there's just so much it can be used for. And I think we're too much focusing maybe on either artificial general intelligence, which is like super intelligence, or software use cases, where I think underhyped would just be integrating into infrastructure. I don't know, I think that's a bad answer, perhaps. But
no, that makes sense. Megan?
Yeah, I feel like Austin just speaks the thoughts that are in my mind. He's like about to say something like exactly that. But yeah, I think we're underhyped in like actually helping people make sense of the AI tools that are out there. I think people generally are very confused at the fact there's so many things that we can choose from and just knowing when to use what.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hillary?
I'll say structure and organization. And I think the reason why it's underhyped, my hypothesis is just that people don't care enough about those things, broadly speaking. But I think that's an area where it could enhance like people's work product.
Yeah. I will just say like everything that Notion has been doing with AI, and I'm like the most biased on that one, but I actually think, especially with the Notion conference coming up next week, if you're in DC, October 2nd, we'll be doing a post Make with Notion workshop. But because I work with like a few different Notion team members and of course the other ambassadors, like the way we're thinking about how to thoughtfully and effectively deploy AI to really boost, yes, your productivity, but just like your workflows is something that I think it's taking AI at face value and all the good that it could potentially do and like curving it to fit the needs of like just your average worker. And that's something that I've always liked about Notion. Like it's really malleable to whatever you need. And the fact that I think the company is so AI focused, but still doing it in like a very Notion way is something that I really respect because it's not easy. And I think that's why other AI companies like OpenAI use Notion for their workspaces because AI companies recognize that as well. But yeah, I mean, I will probably be beating that drum for a while that Notion AI is still underhyped, and we have some things coming up that I think will hopefully change that. All right, episode 2 officially done. Thank you guys. This was Mindful Notions, helping young professionals do more with less with our newest series, Accessible Intelligence. Please, if you are watching or listening on Substack, consider liking this post and also recommending us. It helps us hit new listeners. We are also on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please give us a like there or a rating or review. Again, that helps with just the general feedback cycles and making sure we're actually providing something useful. The next episode will be in 2 Wednesdays. And if you are in London on Saturday, October 18th, we are doing our first live podcast there with me and Megan at the Cheerful Earful podcast. There will be a link in the show description. It will also be recorded and we will upload afterwards. So if you happen to be one of our UK-based fans, please check that out. And until 2 weeks, we will see you then. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.